Hi, I'm Zach, and this is Challenger Vedic Astrology and Tarot. Welcome to the channel. So, today we're talking about who's going to be the next president of the United States. And if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out me and the channel. To be notified whenever I release a new video, be sure to hit the bell icon and select all. And if you'd like a Vedic Sidereal birth chart, a personal tarot reading, or an astrology consultation, the links to those will be in the description box and the comments below. Alright, so today we're talking about who's going to be the next president of the United States. Will it be Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? Now, before I start discussing that, I'm going to, give my, political background or whatever. I am a far left-leaning liberal, but I also strongly believe in the death penalty. So that's kind of my political leanings, just to be transparent with that. Now, when we discuss who's going to be the next president, what we're looking at is a contest. So how do we see who is going to be victorious in a contest? It comes down to strength of planets. That is the most important thing. Now, by strength of planets, what am I referring to? I'm referring to a planet being in its own sign, being in its main home sign, being in its exaltation sign, or having a Nichbung Raj Yoga, which is a combination that shows a cancellation of debilitation. Therefore, it will act as exalted. And also, Virgotama. Is it in the same sign from the birth chart to a divisional chart? Both the D9 and, in this case, it's career related, D10. The Dashamsha. So, we need to look at these factors. Now, that doesn't mean that, you're going to have terrible results if the planet's debilitated. All it means is, every planet, doesn't matter what sign it's in, is going to have positives and negatives. I just want to, say that for, you all when you look at your own charts. But when it comes to a contest of what is going to happen, who will win, it does require that strength of planets to show who will be the victor. Alright, so we're going to look at both of their charts, and we're going to dig deeper into this. So let's get to it. Here we have the birth charts of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. On the left is the birth chart. On the right, we have the D9 Navamsa chart. Now, we're going to have to look at their career chart, too. So, I might actually change this. But first, we'll start with this. Alright. Now, when we look at this, first off, I know I'm covering up the Charadasha. Most of you don't know Charadasha, and I haven't taught it yet on the channel. So, we won't look at Charadasha for now. But when I do timing, I also look at Charadasha. I look at all four of these. Vimshotri from the moon, Vimshotri from the ascendant, Yogini Dasha, and Charadasha. Charadasha being sign-based dashas as opposed to, planetary dashas. Okay. But for now, we're not going to look at Charadasha. Although it also confirms what I'm going to be saying here. Okay. Now, with Kamala Harris's chart, we see that she's in her Rahu Venus Vimshotri Dasha. So, we're going to have to look at the strength of this Dasha here. So, first off, Rahu. Rahu is the Mahadasha Lord, the main Dasha Lord. So Rahu is in the first house. Now, Rahu's dispositor is Gemini. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in the 5th house. This is how we have to look at Rahu and Ketu. So, Mercury is in the 5th house. Rahu will give results in the 1st house and in the 5th house. 5th house is politics. But look what's happening here. Mercury is conjunct the Sun and Neptune. And it's in an exchange yoga because Sun is in Libra, Venus is in Leo, and Sun rules Leo, Venus rules Libra. So all of these planets, all 3 of the physical planets and the 3 outer planets, are in an exchange, behaving like they're conjunct in both houses. So that's a very big deal. So we see Mercury doesn't have a lot of strength, but it's in a good house, the 5th house. First Lord in the 5th house. That's a Raj Yoga, a rise in status. Okay. So that's very important. We see Rahu isn't necessarily strong by sign, but it's creating good yogas, good combinations, and it's in a house that's supporting. Now, the house placement doesn't matter as much when it comes to strength here, unless it's directional strength or directionless. But in this case, Mercury's neither, and Rahu doesn't have directional strength. Or can't have directional strength, I should say. Okay. So, that's when we look at Rahu. But then Venus. Venus is very strong because it's in this exchange yoga, behaving like it's in its own house in Libra. That is very strong. It's behaving like the 5th Lord in the 5th house. So we see Venus is incredibly strong. Now, we're going to look at the same factors in the Navamsha. So in the Navamsha, we have to look at Rahu. Rahu's in the ascendant. Now, in the Navamsha, Rahu is in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, so we have to look at Venus. And Venus is in the 2nd house, in Scorpio. So, not particularly strong, by any means. There's no exchange yoga going on either. Okay. So we see Rahu's okay, being in the ascendant is a good position. It means it's somewhat strong. But the dispositor is not in any particular strength. It's not particularly weak either, though. Now, Venus, we just looked at Venus. Venus isn't particularly strong either. Okay. So, the Navamsha, though, isn't really what we want to look at for that. We need to look at the career chart as well. We're going to double check these in the career chart when I'm done talking about the birth chart and Navamsha, though. Now, let's look at Vimshotri from the ascendant. Well, from the ascendant, we see Mercury, Venus is running. Now, Mercury, Venus, we have to look at Mercury first. Okay, so Mercury is the 1st and 4th Lord in the 5th house, creating 2 different rise and status combinations. Not to mention all the other planets that, it's with and aspecting. Now, we have to look. It's in an exchange yoga here. So now, 1st and 4th Lord is with the 5th and 12th Lord, Venus, because they're acting like they're conjunct between the 2 houses. Now, Venus. Well, we see that Venus again, very strong in the birth chart because it behaves like it's in Libra, its own sign. Now, in the Navamsha, Mercury is in Sagittarius in the 3rd house. It's a good house for Mercury, but there's no exchange yoga happening. There's no exaltation, debilitation. There's no directional strength. It's not directionless. So, it's just okay. And then there's Yogini. Now, Yogini is the one I look at the least. Of these 4 dashas, Yogini is the one I use the least. But you still want to look at it as well. So Rahu, we've already looked at Rahu. So we'll skip Rahu. But Mars. So Mars, in the birth chart, is in Cancer. Well, Moon rules Cancer, and it's in Aries. So there is an exchange happening here. So Mars is very strong. It's acting like the 11th Lord and the 6th Lord in the 11th house. So it's a very strong Mars. And not only that, 11th house is the house of gains, of hopes, wishes, and dreams. And this is creating a Neech Bung Raj Yoga. A yoga or combination that causes a cancellation of debilitation and after struggle behaves exalted. So we clearly see a very strong Mars in the birth chart. Now, in the Navamsha, Mars is in the 6th house. Fights, obstacles, conflict. She's fighting a battle for the presidency. But Mars is in Pisces. Now this is a friendly sign, but it's not particularly strong. And there's no exchange yoga happening. So we see Mars is just okay. Now we need to look at the career chart. So I'm going to change to the Navamsha here. And we'll look at the Dashamsha. Alright. So now we're looking at these planets in the D10 Dashamsha. Okay. So Rahu first. Rahu is in the ascendant once again. Now, dispositor, Rahu's in Gemini. So Mercury is in the 7th house. Now, Mercury is in Sagittarius. Not particularly strong. But we don't look at directional strength in divisional charts. That's only in the birth chart. So we don't have to worry about that. Because directional strength is about the physical placement of the planet on, in the sky, in the horizon. So we don't have to worry about that. Now, Mercury, though, is the 1st and 4th Lord in the 7th house. Another rise and status combination. And it's with Mars, the 11th Lord, and the 6th Lord. So that's creating a Dana Yoga. Gain in wealth. But we see that Rahu's fairly strong. Mercury is okay too. At least with the yogas it's creating. Now, we also want to look at Venus. This all-important Venus, because it's the sub-period running for both dashas. So Venus is in the 11th house of gains and status. The gain of status. Because 11th is second from the 10th. If you want status, 11th house is very important. Can you gain more status? Safe to say, going from vice president to president is more status. Okay. So we see Venus is okay. Venus is in a very good position. Now, it's not in its own sign or anything, but it is creating good yogas. 5th Lord and 12th Lord in the 11th house. That's pretty good. So once again, Adana Yoga. Now, let's look at Mars. So Mars is in the 7th house as the 6th and 11th Lord, with Mercury, the 1st and 4th Lord, and with Ketu. So we see that same Dana Yoga being created. That yoga or combination for wealth. Yeah, for wealth. Okay. So, it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Alright, but now, let's look at Donald Trump's chart and see what's going on there. As soon as I change this back. Okay. Alright, so now we're looking at the birth chart and Navamsha chart of Donald Trump. So, Donald Trump is a Leo ascendant. This is his birth chart here on the left, D9 Navamsha on the right. Now he's going to be running his Jupiter-Venus dasha. Okay, so we have to look at Jupiter and Venus. Now we also have to look at Jupiter and Rahu. So we see Jupiter happening twice. So that's very important. And then we got to look at Rahu. Now for the Yogini dasha, it's Saturn, Mercury. Okay, so those we also have to look at in these three charts. All right, so let's look at that all-important Jupiter. Jupiter is in Virgo in the birth chart. Now, it's not creating any exchange yoga. Mercury is not in Sagittarius or Pisces. Jupiter's in the second house, so no directional strength. Now, is it creating any good yogas? Well, Jupiter is the 5th and 8th lord in the second house. So we see Adana yogas being created. Yoga for wealth. Okay. So, Jupiter is just okay in the birth chart. It's not great. It's kind of average. Okay. Now, let's look at this Jupiter in the Navamsha. So, Jupiter is in Leo in the D9 Navamsha. Now, Sun is in Virgo. So, no exchange yoga is happening. So we see Jupiter's kind of just okay on that front. Now, yogas it's creating. Jupiter is the 7th and 10th lord in mutual aspect with Mercury, the 1st and 4th lord. So we do see a rise in status combination. A Raj yoga. Alright, so that's okay. Jupiter looks alright in both of these dashas. But not great. Jupiter's just average. Now, Venus, though. Let's look at Venus. So, Venus is in Cancer in the 12th house. Now, it's not in an exchange yoga. Moon is not in Venus' sign. And it's conjunct Saturn. Now, Venus is the 3rd and 10th lord, conjunct the 6th and 7th lord. So, no good yoga is really being created. So this Venus is just okay in the birth chart, or so you would think. But then we look at the D9 Navamsha chart. Venus is in Cancer again. It's Virgotama. Virgotama means it's in the same sign in the birth chart and in the relevant divisional chart. D9 Navamsha is always relevant. So we see Venus is very strong, actually. Venus behaves exalted. That's what Virgotama means. Alright, so that's very good for Venus. Now, let's look at Rahu. Let's look at the yogas real quick. So, Venus is with Saturn, again. Now, Venus is the 5th and 12th lord. Saturn is the 8th and 9th lord. So, there's a few yogas being created here. One is Adana yoga, first off, yoga for wealth. The other is a Sarala yoga. Yeah. Okay. Sarala yoga and a Vimala yoga. Alright. Which is a yoga tied to overcoming obstacles to have success. Okay. So, that all makes a lot of sense. Venus looks pretty good. Now, let's look at Rahu. So, Rahu is in the 10th house. Okay, 10th house is status. 10th house is government. So that's very significant. But Rahu is acting like Venus. It's dispositor since it's in Taurus. Okay. Well, Venus is in the 12th house. But remember, Venus is, well, that doesn't affect Rahu. Never mind, actually. Well, it's still kind of important. So Venus is actually Virgotama. So that actually is giving Rahu some strength here, because Venus is strong. So Rahu is behaving like that strong Venus. Rahu kind of clones itself, like the planet that rules the sign it's in. Okay. And also, this Rahu is conjunct the Sun. So Sun is the first lord. Okay. So that's not really creating a particular, yoga or anything. But this Rahu is actually fairly strong. So that's important to know. Now, we also have to look at Saturn with the Yogini Dasha. So Saturn is in the 12th house in the birth chart. We already mentioned the yogas it's creating and everything, because we talked about Venus earlier. But now, in the Navamsha, Saturn is in the same sign, in Cancer. So we clearly see Saturn is very strong. So that's important. Now we also have to look at Mercury. So Mercury in the birth chart is in the 11th house, in its own sign of Gemini. So we see Mercury has strength. Now, in the Navamsha though, Mercury is in Aquarius in the 9th house. So, Mercury is creating those good yogas or combinations with Jupiter. We saw that before. And also, Mercury is the first and fourth lord in the 9th house. That's a Raj Yoga, rise and status combination. But Mercury in Aquarius isn't particularly strong. It's just average. Okay. So, the ones that really have strength are Venus and Saturn and that Rahu. So those are important. Now, let's look at Donald Trump's D10 Dashamsha chart. Also, Dashamsha, let me clarify this. Dashamsha isn't just career. It's a person's status in the world. It's the dissected 10th house. Career, status, your reputation. So that's what D10 Dashamsha chart shows. So it's very important. Especially when we're looking at a person being president. Now let's look at this Jupiter. First in the D10 Dashamsha chart. So Jupiter is in the 4th house in Capricorn. So Jupiter's debilitated. But we have to look at Saturn, the dispositor. It's in Pisces. That's Jupiter's sign. So there is an exchange yoga happening here. There is a cancellation of debilitation happening here. And Jupiter behaves exalted. That's a very big deal. That's very big. Now, we also see Venus is exalted as well in this combination. Saturn's going to be strong because it's behaving like its own sign as well. We see a lot of yogas being created here. Jupiter is the 3rd and 6th lord. Saturn is the 4th and 5th lord. Venus is the 1st and 8th lord. So we see Harsha Yoga is being created. Yoga for overcoming enemies. We see Sarala Yoga is being shown here. Overcoming sudden obstacles. We see that Raj Yoga happening. Rise in status. So this is a very strong combination for him. So that's very significant. So Jupiter is incredibly strong. And we also just looked at Saturn. Saturn is also incredibly strong. Okay. And Saturn's even creating its own Raj Yoga, 5th lord in the 4th house. Alright. Now, let's look at Venus. Well, Venus we already looked at, actually. Venus is a part of this exchange. And Venus is exalted. So Venus is very strong. Now, let's look at this Rahu. Rahu is in the ascendant, in the sign of Libra, behaving like that exalted Venus in the 6th house. Okay. So we see Rahu is very strong as well. Now, Mercury. Mercury is in the 2nd house, in Scorpio. Now, that's not particularly strong, but Scorpio is ruled by Mars. Mars is in the 12th house, in Virgo. So we see an exchange. Mercury is behaving exalted in the 12th house. So we see that exchange yoga gives Mercury that strength. And Mars is the 2nd and 7th lord. Mercury is the 9th and 12th lord. So this is creating a Raj Yoga, a rise in status combination, a Dana Yoga, an increase in wealth combination. So this is also pretty good. It's very good, giving Mercury a lot of strength. All right. So after looking at all these factors, it's very significant. Now, something we have to look at here, though, is we have to look at nakshatras of these planets, see what they're showing. We have to look at transits as well in both of their charts. Okay, so let's look at some of that. So, in Kamala Harris's chart, see, she's running Rahu Venus. So Rahu is in Mrigashira. Mrigashira is about searching. But searching for what? Well, Rahu's dispositor, the Nakshatra Lord is in the 2nd house. So 2nd house is finances. Because Mars rules Mrigashira. So, not only is Mars in the 2nd house, but it's behaving like it's in the 11th house because of the exchange yoga with Moon. So this clearly shows she's searching for gains, searching for money. And her campaign, I believe, has raised the most money in presidential race history, I believe. So that's a big deal. And we see that theme playing out. Now we also have to look at Venus. Well, Venus is in Purva Falguni. Okay, so Purva Falguni isn't really tied to anything relevant. It's tied to being lazy. She hasn't really, especially when it comes to communication, 3rd house of communication, 5th house of politics. So we see that laziness comes in. Now, how is this relevant? Well, Kamala Harris hasn't really been doing a lot of communicating, despite being in this presidential race. It's been kind of limited. She hasn't been getting out there as much as she maybe could or should. So we kind of see that theme playing out. But let's look at Mercury. So Mercury is in Swati. Swati is a constellation of business. Swati is about business. It's about, trying to think how to say this. It's about independence. It's about freedom. Now, why is that relevant? Well, think about, a woman's right to choose. When it comes to, like, Roe v. Wade. That's a big part of her campaign that she's running on. So we see that theme playing out. And then there's the Yogini. So Mars. Mars is in Ashlesha. We've already looked at Rahu. So Ashlesha is tied to manipulation. So Mars is in the 2nd house of finances, acting like it's in the 11th house of large organizations, large groups of people. So we see manipulation when it comes to money, when it comes to large groups of people, when it comes to finances. Now, of course there's going to be some manipulation. This is politics. Hopefully, we're not naive enough to think there's no manipulation happening. But in her chart, with the Nakshatra or constellation theme, it's very clear. Now, let's look at Donald Trump's chart. See the Nakshatras running in his chart. In these dashas. Okay, so we're looking at Jupiter. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't I look in the Navamsha? Well, Navamsha shows more of a person's internal world. Now, I could look at the Dashamsha, but that will show minute details. So we're not really focused on that with the Nakshatras. But we definitely have to look at them in the birth chart, because that will show the overall theme. Okay. So Jupiter's in Chitra. Chitra is a nakshatra tied to games. It's tied to assassinations. Safe to say, that's very relevant because there was an attempted assassination. It's also tied to money. Well, he's trying to raise finances for his presidential campaign. So we see that theme's relevant. Now Venus. Well, Venus is in Punarvasu in the 12th house. So first off, 12th house is tied to losses. And then Punarvasu. Punarvasu is repeated failure. Repeated failure. Which, look at his marriages. He has repeatedly failed in marriage. Repeatedly failed in business. That's very relevant. So we see that theme of repeated failures playing out. Now, has it really played out yet? Not really. Maybe I haven't been paying enough attention. But we have that theme to pay attention to. Because despite Venus being strong, there's still that main theme of repeated failures running. Can't ignore that. Now, we also have Rahu that we have to look at. Well, Rahu is in Mrigashira. So we have to look at Mars. Mars is in the first house. So, Rahu is searching. But searching for what? Well, it's in the first house. And Mars is in Maga. Constellation of kings. Constellation of high status. Constellation of government. So he is searching for status. Searching to become the king. That's what he wants to be. He wants to be the president. So we see that theme clearly playing out. Now, Saturn. Well, Saturn is in Punarvasu in the 12th house. In Cancer there. So we see repeated failures in the house of losses. 12th house. So we see that theme could play out. Now, we also have to look at Mercury. Well, Mercury is in the 11th house in Ardra Nakshatra. So Ardra is a nakshatra or constellation of heartbreak and sorrow and anger. And this is tied to the 11th house. 11th house is friends, network circle, large organizations, large gatherings. He's making people angry. But this also shows he could have a lot of anger and sorrow when it comes to his network circles, when it comes to his finances. So we see that theme could be playing out. Also, Ardra is tied to betrayals. So, his relationship with J.D. Vance doesn't seem to be going so well. Well, that's Ardra. And safe to say it was similar with his last vice president, who was so irrelevant I can't even remember his name right now. Okay, but so these are the nakshatra themes that we have to look at. Now we need to look at transits. So let's look at transits and see what's going on there. Alright, So this is going to look confusing at first, but I'm going to make it simpler. Okay. So, here we have Kamala Harris's chart. Once I rotate it to the right ascendant. Hold up. Okay. Alright, so this looks confusing at first. I'm going to explain it. Now, this inner plate here, look where the ascendant is, AS, in the heart of this. This inner square is the birth chart and the birth chart placements. This outer ring, these are the transiting planets. Okay. So now that I've explained that, we have to look at this. It's very important. Alright. So, the election's going to be happening, or the count or whatever, is going to be happening in a few days here. On the 5th. Okay. So, what we have to look at are the major physical planets, the ones that have a big impact. So Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. We also have to look at Rahu and Ketu. The slower moving planets are most important when it comes to transits. But also Sun. Sun is your focus. So in Kamala Harris's chart, we see Jupiter is in the 12th house transiting over her Jupiter. It's her Jupiter return. But Jupiter is retrograde. Retrograde behaving like it's in the 11th house. Because retrograde planets behave like they're in the previous house. Except for Mercury. So, Jupiter is behaving not like it's in the 12th house of losses. But like it's in the 11th house of gains. Now, Saturn. Saturn is retrograde in the 9th house. Also, her Saturn return. So, from the 9th house, it's going to behave like it's in the 8th. Well, sudden change taking place. Secrets being dealt with. Now, Rahu. Rahu is in the 10th house, transiting. That might be a little hard to see for you all, but that's where Rahu is. Okay, so we see status. We see government. We see career. So that's what Rahu's affecting. We see Ketu transiting in the 4th house. 4th house is a person's homeland. So we also see that theme playing out. Now, don't think Ketu's going to make it so she's going to be separated from her homeland and have to move away or something. No. Ketu can show a number of things transiting there. Alright. So we see from the ascendant, transits are looking okay for her. We see gains. We see sudden changes. Also, Mars. Mars is in the 2nd house. She's earning more money. Also spending out on necessities during this time. Now, we also have to look from her moon. Well, from her moon, Saturn is retrograde in the 11th, behaving like it's in the 10th. So we see status, career, government. Jupiter is retrograde in the 2nd, behaving like it's in the 1st. Now, of course, we would also look at the houses that they rule. Like Jupiter would be the 9th and 12th lord in the 1st house. Well, that shows dealing with a lot of foreign things, which makes sense. She's in the government. But now we also have to look at the sun. Rahu and Ketu first. Where are they? Rahu's in the 12th house. Okay. So, 12th house of loss. 12th house of foreign lands. So, there's a lot of, foreign relations going on. Especially with, everything going on in Israel. And the Middle East. Ketu in the 6th house of competition. And work. Now we also have to look from the sun. So from the sun, we see Jupiter in the 8th, retrograde, behaving like it's in the 7th. So the masses, Sudden change with the masses, because Jupiter is bringing that 8th house energy into the 7th. Saturn is retrograde in the 5th house of politics, behaving like it's in the 4th house of homeland. Ketu's in the 12th house of loss. And Mars is energizing the 10th house of career and status and government. Now, we need to do the same thing in Donald Trump's chart. So let's look there. Okay. So, in Donald Trump's chart. There we go. Actually, one second. I need a drink, y'all. Then we'll continue. Okay. So, in Donald Trump's chart, we see Jupiter is retrograde in the 10th house, behaving like it's in the 9th house. Okay. So, 9th house is foreign places, foreign travel, foreign people. It's the law. He's dealing with legal issues. Saturn is transiting in the 7th. Retrograde, behaving like it's in the 6th. So, safe to say, a lot of people have a problem with them. It's in the 6th house, behaving like it's in the 6th house because it's retrograde. So, 6th house is legal disputes. So, we see legal disputes. He's also in competition for the presidency. So, we see that as well. Mars is in the 12th house of losses. Rahu's in the 8th of sudden change and transformation and secrets. And Ketu's in the 2nd. Not really particularly relevant for this. Okay, now we have to look at it from the moon. So from the moon, let's see, Jupiter is in the 7th. Retrograde, behaving like it's in the 6th. So once again, a lot of people having problems with them. A lot of people bringing conflict his way. 6th house of legal disputes. Competition. Rahu is transiting in the 5th of politics. Desire for politics. Ketu in the 11th. Separation from friends. Separation from network circle. Separation from large organizations, large gatherings. And I think I've heard not many people have been coming to his gatherings compared to the past. So we see that kind of playing out. Saturn retrograde in the 4th, behaving like it's in the 3rd. Well, 4th house is the homeland. 3rd house is loss of homeland because it's 12th from the 4th. So that could show loss of support in the homeland. But that could also show dealing with foreign issues. And Sun is in the 12th. So focused on the 12th house. 12th house is losses, foreign people, foreign places. Now we also have to look from his Sun. So Sun, let's see, from the Sun, we see Jupiter is retrograde in the 1st house. So, behaving like it's in the 12th house. 12th house of losses in foreign lands. Now, Saturn is retrograde, behaving like it's in the 9th house of foreign lands and the law. Okay. Now, Rahu is in the 11th. Desire for gains. Desire for dealing with large organizations. Large gatherings. And Ketu is in the 5th house. 5th house of politics. And Sun, his focus, is in the 6th house of competition and the law. Mars is in the 3rd house of communication, social media. Okay. So, taking all of this into account, who is likely to win here? Well, for that, I want to show what happened when Donald Trump lost the presidency last time. So, go back here. Donald Trump was in Jupiter Saturn. So, Jupiter Saturn. Let's see. Hold on. Okay. So, he was running Jupiter Saturn. So, we see he's still running Jupiter Dasha. Except this time he's running Jupiter Venus. Now, what's similar there? Well, Jupiter, first off, of course. We saw Jupiter doesn't have that much strength in the birth chart and the Navamsha. But Saturn does. Saturn is Virgotama. In the same sign. But Saturn is in that constellation of loss. Punarvasu. Repeated failure. In the 12th house of losses. Now in the Dashamsha. Even though Saturn is in the 6th house, Jupiter in the 4th house, they're in exchange. They're both incredibly strong. We see that he lost. Now, we also have to look at that Jupiter-Mercury. Well, Mercury is strong in the birth chart, 11th lord in the 11th house, and it's strong in the Dashamsha. Behaves exalted, but he still lost. Alright, so I am having to refilm this part. I accidentally started talking about 2016 for the Vimshotri from the Ascendant and the Vimshotri, and the Yogini Dasha. Alright, so I'm refilming this part. Now, let's look at 2020 in the Vimshotri from the Ascendant. So we talked about Jupiter and Saturn. And how Saturn, is in Punarvasu. Nakshatra, or constellation of repeated losses. Now, Jupiter-Venus. When he lost last time, well, Venus still showing those themes of repeated losses. Even though it's Virgotama, it's in the same sign, in the birth chart, in the D9 Navamsha. And then, in the career chart, the D10 Dashamsha. Look, Jupiter in an exchange yoga with Saturn and Venus, behaving like it's strong in its own sign. Venus exalted in Pisces, but still he lost. And then, not Mercury Rahu, he was in Saturn Venus. And if that doesn't spell it out, nothing will. Saturn Venus in Punarvasu in the 12th house of loss back in 2020 when Donald Trump lost. Even though Saturn and Venus were Virgotama, acting exalted. And then, in the career chart, Saturn and Venus. Saturn behaving like it's in its own sign. In the 4th and 6th house. In strength. Venus exalted. And still, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. So sometimes we see a nakshatra's themes will override even strength of planets. Alright. Yeah, so we clearly see with this that even though Donald Trump ran very strong time periods back when he was running for presidency before, that he still lost. So we see Kamala Harris is running similarly, there we go, strong time period. this time as Donald Trump is right now. Donald Trump's chart shows a theme of repeated losses. It shows themes of him having to deal with litigation through the transits. Now, how's that relevant? Especially when courts have said that he has the right to pardon himself. If he became president, he would surely do that. So why would his transit show long-term dealing with legal issues? For at least the next year, close to it. Or half a year, I mean. And also, we see quite a bit of transiting planets in the 12th house of loss. Now, that could show foreign policy, sure, dealing with foreign countries. But with all these other factors, I think it shows these repeated losses. Now, just to put this in perspective, honestly, outside of a moral standpoint of not wanting Donald Trump to be president, I don't really care. I don't like either of these candidates. I'm a far left-leaning liberal. I think they're both terrible. I'll be honest. I think they're both terrible. But do I want a convicted rapist to be president? No. Do I want somebody that manipulates the public and probably won't fulfill their promises? No. And that applies to both of them. Yeah, no. I'm not looking forward to the next 4 years with either president. But considering it's unlikely there will be another option, thanks to, Reagan legalizing corporate bribes of politicians through campaign contributions, and a rigged two-party system. This is what we got. So, my prediction is that Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. And that's what I have for you. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out me in the channel. To be notified whenever I release a new video, be sure to hit the bell icon and select all. And if you'd like a Vedic Sidereal birth chart, a personal tarot reading, or an astrology consultation, the links to those will be in the description box and the comments below. And if you'd like to donate to help support the channel, the links to those will be in the description box as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.